Buckingham Palace. Well, how did it come about? That particular action, actually, it's the last piece of non-violent direct action I took when I was associated with Buckingham Common. The last time I got arrested anyway and charged for anything. The last court case I took part in. So it begins the book. So in a way, it's kind of the last event from the story. But the background to that action was I lived at Greenham Common. We were very active against nuclear weapons, cruise missiles in particular at Greenham Common. We became very involved in the campaign to stop nuclear weapons testing in Nevada, particularly British nuclear weapons testing. Did lots of actions around that, and decided one very cold night in February, I think it was 1992, that Buckingham Palace would be a good location for an action because it's very easy for the media to get to, and it's got huge symbolism in terms of the British state, and what we wanted to do was to target the British state in terms of its nuclear weapons testing programme in Nevada.
Yeah, and what was going on in Nevada at the time?
Well, we were aware of what was going on in Nevada. When I lived at Greenham Common, I used to open the Post. I used to deal with particularly the transatlantic post. I'm not particularly good at languages, so I used to write. People would send us cheques in the post in US dollars with a separate bank account that we put them into. I think it was called the anti-nuclear account. I don't know why, but that account was kept separate from the main camp account. And so I'd write thank you letters to these people. And through this sometimes this turned into correspondence that went on for months, if not years. And through this correspondence with activists, largely activists or philanthropists in the United States, I started to take an interest in anti-nuclear affairs there. I took out a subscription in US dollars. I had to post the cash, I remember, those days, to the Nuclear Resistor, very much an activist-based magazine in the southwest United States. And so I read about everything that was going on there. I read about nuclear weapons testing in Nevada, but particularly the actions against it. So I had this sort of background knowledge of what was going on in Nevada, in a bit of the way, like if you read the financial papers, so I know about Barclays' attitude to the crash in 2008, and all the stuff is, I'm not an expert, but I have a background knowledge of how Barclays Bank fared during the 2008 crash, for example. So I had this background knowledge. Completely out of the blue, I was living a kind of slightly different life. I just got, I've been working for a few months for a life insurance company in Bristol. I had a phone call one evening from a woman I knew from Greenham Common, Rebecca Johnson, asking if I would like to take part in an action to stop a British nuclear weapons test in Nevada. It's the sort of thing I'd read about for years. I'd never thought of going to Nevada. It was, it's a big trip. I hadn't really sort of thought that was the United States place I particularly wanted to spend a lot of time, but I had been there, and I just immediately said yes. With throwing caution to the wind, thinking, well, I'm slightly bored working in a life insurance company. I'd like to go into Nevada. So within days, I was in Nevada, meeting people in the Nevada desert, particularly members of the Western Shoshone Nation. The Western Shoshone Nation are the Native American people whose land includes the Nevada test site. The Nevada test site is where the British and the US have tested their nuclear weapons since the 1950s. And so, kind of out of the blue, met the Western Shoshone, who very much were backing this action. Rebecca worked for Greenpeace, that's how come she had the money and everything to put this action together. Rebecca had just met the Western Shoshone or some related activists at an anti-nuclear conference, who'd suggested that she should organise British women, British people in fact, to stop one of the British tests they knew were coming up. Rebecca had agreed that was a great idea and got home and sort of rung the people she thought would be interested. Myself, my then girlfriend Jane, and Lorna, a good friend Lorna. And so the three of us basically went to Nevada, got briefed very quickly, and within days set out into the desert to stop the nuclear weapons test. It was all very sort of dramatic. It was in the international press. We were a bit too last minute. We ran on to the ground zero minutes before the detonation was due, which is incredibly risky. Wasn't planned. sort of action to take. It's not quite how we imagined things would turn out, but it's just how things happened. Managed to delay the test. Really, the Western Shoshone were very pleased with us, very pleased with our action, very pleased with the subsequent court case where we managed to highlight all sorts of legal matters which were actually considered in court in relation to their right to give us permission to go onto their land. And I kept that link with them. I went back, a couple of years after the court case and volunteered for them. And so the Western Shoshone and their struggle, their very genuine grassroots struggle to stop nuclear weapons testing on their sacred land, was something I became very committed to just through meeting them actually, and that chance to do that action. And that's how come we decided to break into Buckingham Palace. We never got into the actual palace, but I would say break into Buckingham Palace because, we got within sight of the royal family. That was good enough for me, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were very concerned about the Western Shoshone, but weren't you concerned more about your own safety, and didn't you think it was a tremendous risk?
In terms of breaking into Buckingham Palace, well, I think the thing is we'd lived with Michael Heseltine at Greenham Commons saying that the Greenham women should be shot if they got within reach of the nuclear missile silos. And we'd done that, no one has shot us. And so I think we always felt like, when we managed to do something and we hadn't had the outcome, dangerous and difficult outcome we thought might happen, it almost was like, it's like playing cards, you've got another life. And so I think we thought there was some sort of risk, associated with Buckingham Palace. This is a fairly civilised country and people don't normally get shot. So I suppose we thought it was a back-down possibility, but we were young, we wanted to make our point. And it was so obvious to us that we were peaceful protesters. I don't think we thought that it was a huge consideration, the possibility of being shot.
No.
We took the risk anyway.
And the risk of being arrested wasn't a problem. You knew you'd be arrested.
We assumed we'd be arrested. I was quite concerned actually what we'd get arrested for. I mean, I sort of had plans at that point in my life to do things that involved not being in prison. I wasn't planning to read a lot of books in prison. I was planning to sort of study. I'd got a place to do a master's degree in the autumn at Bristol University, and I'd got funding completely out of the blue. And I was quite keen to be there, on the 1st of October, whenever it started. So I was slightly worried that we might get something big chucked to us. I was really worried about being done for conspiracy. But I thought it was worth the risk. And the thing is, this was the moment when this action needed to happen. We'd thought about it over a year beforehand, and it needed to happen at that point to be fully effective.
Mm.
At that point in history, the British were dragging their feet. They were behaving as badly as the Chinese or the French. They were dragging their feet over ending underground nuclear weapons testing. They were asking the US to be allowed to break the voluntary moratorium and detonate to continue more testing. There hadn't been any testing, I don't think, at that point for a year in Nevada. And the British government were lobbying the US to be allowed to resume nuclear weapons testing, and we felt like they couldn't be allowed to do that and get away with it. And although we didn't think the US would give in to their demands, we wanted to highlight actually what was going on, and it was the British who were the problem. The British were causing these problems in Nevada.
Mm.
So we went to the Queen, she's the head of state,
Yeah. I found it interesting when I tried to look up on the internet the various cases of people breaking into Buckingham Palace, that the Greenham women's action isn't really mentioned. They seem to list all these other, nutcases who'd broken into the palace, but there's very little about this action in particular. And I wondered if that was there was a political reason for that.
Well, perhaps the government doesn't want to encourage other activists or protesters to break into Buckingham Palace. So actually, if our action was more widely known, maybe that would encourage other people to repeat it. I mean, the thing is, once somebody does something, and I think some of the consequences of their action were to do with actually downplaying what had happened and trying to sort of sweep it under the carpet.
Yes, because you got off very lightly, really.
Yeah, we did really, considering to start with they did charge us with conspiracy. So I worried. I never wanted to get done for conspiracy. It's one of the few things I never wanted to be prosecuted for. And so when they dropped the charges, I think just to criminal damage in the end, I was quite pleased with that. I still knew that the act of criminal damage, you could get sent to prison for up to 10 years. And a friend of mine had been sent to prison for a year for that. So I wasn't keen to get the full brunt of the law. But I think at that point that a decision had been made to downplay what had happened, not to encourage other people to behave like that, not to create an outcry, and to just sort of deal with this and get rid of us. By the time we were, the court case happened in the autumn, that is.